Allison Grant-Luness, author of Foolproof French Visas and host of the podcast Profiles in Franceformation. Now, in this video / bonus podcast episode, I want to just go over one of the points that we discussed with Harriet Welty Rochefort, the American writer who has lived in Paris for over 50 years. Now, one of the things I'm going to be doing in these bonus podcast episodes / YouTube videos is talking about some of the administrative points that we discuss and challenges that we discuss in the podcast episodes, so that I can give you an idea of the challenges that my guests have navigated and how you can approach them on your own. So Harriet Welty Rochefort, the guest in my first episode of Profiles in Franceformation, is the author of 3 books on the French and living in France, and 1 novel called Final Transgression. All of her books are available on Amazon and linked in the show notes. And what I'm going to talk about today is Harriet had a very easy time when she moved to France and actually immigrated into the French system. She basically had to request a residency permit and eventually got naturalization. But there wasn't really a process at that time in the late 60s and early 70s whereby American citizens had to do complicated visa processes and lots of regulations about who could come and stay and all of that stuff. So she was able to request a residency permit very easily, and then she was not able to apply for French naturalization until 1996. Now, she talked about briefly about a US law that was changed in 1996, and after that she was able to rush down to the prefecture in Paris and apply for naturalization as a French citizen. Now, prior to 1996, any US citizen who was naturalized as a citizen of a foreign country was automatically stripped of their US citizenship. So the US did not recognize the ability to have dual citizenship if you were not, born with both. And there were several ways that US citizens could lose their citizenship, including taking a job with a foreign government. So even something as innocuous as getting a teaching job in France, where teachers are employees of the government, working with TAPIF, the teaching assistant program in France, or enlisting in the foreign military. All of those would be instances that would previously cause Americans to lose their US citizenship. Fortunately, in 1996, it became a lot easier for an American to become a dual national. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is why you might want to become a naturalized French citizen after living in France for several years. And one of the things that we'll be exploring in the Profiles in Franceformation podcast episodes is what makes an immigrant or an expat living in France feel French enough to request citizenship. So for some people, like Harriet explained in her episode, requesting naturalization is basically an administrative process. She had been living here a long time. She had a job. She was paying taxes. She was married to a French person. Her children were French, and she felt fairly integrated. So it wasn't for her a very deep, a deeply emotional process in which she felt that she had to do something else to prove or to feel like she deserved to become a French citizen. For her, meeting the basic requirements seemed to be enough. Now, for others, like our guest Michael Olnick, who is our guest in episode 3, for him, his identity was very important, and he doesn't yet feel like he deserves to be French. He feels that for him, he would have to feel like he met a certain level of Frenchness and a certain level of integration into French society before he would feel comfortable requesting nationality. So one of the things that we'll talk about throughout our episodes and with our many guests is, at what point do you feel like you deserve to apply to be naturalized as a French citizen? And is there an identity question that comes into play with feeling like you're still very American or very, have a very strong tie to your identity as being from your home country? And at what point does that identity matter less than the fact of living in France and wanting the benefits of becoming a French citizen? So French citizenship is not that difficult to get. I'll talk about the criteria a little bit later in this video, but obviously you have to make the decision to apply at some point and decide whether or not you want those benefits and obviously responsibilities of being a citizen. So, what are the benefits of becoming a naturalized French citizen? As Harriet mentions in her episode, she was working as a journalist. She was working for Time Magazine, the International Herald Tribune, and it was very difficult for her. She was easily able to find jobs and get work authorizations, and this was before the European Union existed. But she may have had a different career or different work opportunities if she had become French earlier. Because there are many jobs in the government, and even people like teachers, post office workers, uh, in certain public service areas are French government positions, or even now they're open to EU citizens as well. Uh, those opportunities were not available to her as a non-French or non-European. Well, European didn't exist yet, but as a non-French person in the 70s, those opportunities were not available to her. So she was fairly limited in certain types of careers that she could not access. And even today, if you want to be a teacher or work in certain government positions, fonctionnaire positions, a lot of those are going to require at least European citizenship, if not French citizenship, and obviously a very high level of French language skills. Uh, in addition, obviously, citizenship enables you to vote and to express your opinion through political suffrage. And that's important to you if you want to have a voice in your local elections, if you want to participate in any kind of political action. You don't have to be French to, for example, start an association or participate in an association. But if you want to work either at the local or municipal level or at any level in French politics, you really need to have French citizenship. One of the other main benefits of having French or any European citizenship is that it enables you to live and work in other EU countries as well. So with a French passport, you can leave France indefinitely and then return. You can easily transmit French citizenship to your minor children, including if you already have children before you become a naturalized French citizen. Your minor children will also get French citizenship at the same time as you. So um, with any type of visa, or even with a long stay, a long-term residence permit like a 10-year card, you can be limited in the types of work that you're allowed to do outside of France in other countries in the European Union. You're limited in the amount of time that you can spend outside of France or living outside of France while maintaining your residency status. And you have to maintain your residency status for a certain number of years before you're able to apply for citizenship. So obviously, once you become a citizen, then, if you want to go and live for 10 years in Ireland or Italy or wherever, you would still maintain that French citizenship, be able to come back at any time, obviously be able to move to Italy or any other country in the EU without having to go through the arduous process of getting a visa or a residency permit converted for another country. Finally, if renouncing your US citizenship is something that interests you, there's been a lot of increased interest in renouncing during the past couple of years due to certain tax laws that are now affecting Americans abroad more and more. But you have to have another citizenship first. So if you don't yet have another citizenship, becoming naturalized as a French citizen or getting citizenship from another EU country is one of the first steps in order to be able to renounce your US passport. So it's important to know that certain visas will allow you to ultimately apply for French naturalization or lead you to other visa types that will enable you to make that application, but not all visa types can lead to a long-term residency permit, so a 10-year card, or the naturalization process. Basically, the visa types that are considered immigrant visa types are the ones that would allow you to work full time and to renew indefinitely. So notably, if you're on a student visa, an au pair visa, any kind of temporary work permit, or a visitor visa, you don't really have a clear path to citizenship. And so those are the visa types you want to avoid if you want to ultimately become a long-term French resident or a naturalized French citizen. Now, all of these things are explored in my book, Foolproof French Visas, where I go through every single visa type that exists, basically, and I tell you for each visa type what potential paths you have for staying in France long term, if that's something you decide you want, or um, or applying for French naturalization. As an example, if you were to come to France with a 3-year intercompany transfer visa, so it's called salarié en mission, where you're transferred from a company outside of France to work in France, that visa is normally limited to 3 years, and you cannot renew or extend it in France for any reason. So even if you're on an expat contract, you're on this visa type, and you have a very high salary, at some point you're not going to be able to renew your visa. You're going to have to go back to your home country to apply for a new visa, and then those 3 years that you already spent in France do not count towards the length of time required for uh, getting that 10-year residency card, or count towards the 5 years required to apply for naturalization. So that's something that I like to talk about with my clients from our very first phone call, so that I can have a good idea of whether staying long term is a potential goal for them. And I prefer to work with clients who, or, if there are some doubts about whether or not you would want to stay long term, I prefer to plan as though you're going to stay forever, because I know it's always possible to go home and to return to your home country and decide that it's not for you, or to not apply for French naturalization, or to not request the 10-year card. That's always a possibility. But if you come here on the wrong visa type and then you decide you do want to stay, it can be a very complicated and long process to straighten things out and get you on the right visa type that does give you those options. And it can kind of be a big mess. So if you, for any reason, think that you may want to eventually settle in France, that could be something that you want, give yourself the option from the very beginning, so that you don't have to go through complicated visa switches and go home and lose time, and have it cost a lot of time and money that in a way that's unnecessary. So there are 2 ways to become a French citizen, if you do not have French citizenship through heritage or anything like that. There's citizenship through marriage, and there's citizenship by decree. Now, it's important to know that you have to have a valid carte de séjour for living in France in order to apply for naturalization, but you do not have to have a 10-year card. During the naturalization process, you still have to continually renew your carte de séjour, or your visa, uh, until your citizenship actually goes through. And once your citizenship is approved, it's published in an official journal, and it will actually block your carte de séjour renewal in the French immigration system. So your carte de séjour will actually be voided in the prefecture system once your naturalization has been approved. I was actually in line behind a young woman at the prefecture one time, and she had come because her card was expired. She had a récépissé that was expiring. She wanted another one, and the woman was looking her up in the system and couldn't find her number. It's like, I can't find, I can't renew your récépissé because I can't find you. And the young woman was like, well, I have to have it for my boss so that I can go to work. And then she finally found the answer. Congratulations, you have become French. And the woman was not able to give her a récépissé because her naturalization had been approved since the last time she had gotten that récépissé. So that was a really nice moment to experience. For citizenship by marriage, you need to be married to a French citizen for 4 years if you've been living in France together, and for 5 years if you've been living outside of France. So if you're living together with a French person and married for at least 5 years outside of France, you can actually get citizenship through your local French consulate with your French spouse. And you can do that all without ever having lived in France. And so one of the benefits of that is, if you're applying from outside of France, it goes a lot more quickly through the consulates because they have far fewer demands and requests than the prefectures within France. And so many couples, what they'll do is, if they're living outside of France, then they'll go through the process before they decide to relocate back to France. And then that facilitates the whole process. Like, you don't have to apply for a visa. You can get healthcare automatically when you arrive, and things like that. Um, Now, one situation is if you are with a French spouse and you've been married, even if it's been longer than 5 years, and then you move to France, you will have to wait another 3 years of actually living in France before you can apply. So that can be a little bit complicated and extend your timeline slightly. Uh, as part of the application through marriage, you will have to provide documents proving that you've been living together, that neither of you secretly has other spouses anywhere, and you'll have to have a language test showing that you have at least a B1 level of French. Now, for getting married, getting naturalization through being married to a French citizen, it's a much more automatic process. Uh, there isn't so much of a control of, are you integrated, are you are you financially stable? There's no income minimum. There is a little bit of, are you integrated, in the sense that there have been cases of people being refused for, uh, their men being refused because their wives were deemed too submissive and things like that, and not fitting into like cultural Republican values, French Republican values. But for most cases, as Americans, you're not going to necessarily have to worry about that. Um, the one main concern is it can be very easy to get, but if you get divorced within 2 years of receiving your French nationality, it can actually be taken away. And so you want to be a little bit careful. And if your relationship is on the rocks, you don't want to be applying through those means, because you are going to have to go through an interview together, and they'll be asking you questions, and you want to make sure that there aren't going to be any doubts about whether or not the marriage is valid and things of that nature. Now, naturalization by decree is much more difficult to get, and it's a more complex application to assemble. And there are two main criteria. One is that you have to prove that you've been living in France for at least 5 years continually, which means that even if you've changed your visa status, you haven't gone back to get a new visa. So, for example, if you were an au pair for 18 months and then went back to the US to get a visa, and then were on a temporary work visa with the French American Chamber of Commerce for 18 months and then went back to get a different visa, those 3 years total are not going to count towards your period of continually living in France. So, on the other hand, if you are a student for 2 years and then switch to the formerly APS visa, recherche d'emploi, and then you switch to a salarié visa, and you've been in a CDI for 2 years, and you've been in 5 years total, but with several different visa types, that's okay, as long as you haven't returned to the US or to your home country to get a new visa and a new EGDEF number and go through the OP process again. Anything like that is going to reset your clock back to 0. Now, the other main criteria is proving your financial stability. So that means showing the past 5 years of taxes that you paid, and that you're earning more than 1.5 times the minimum wage. And usually it means that you're either on a CDI and outside of your trial period, or that you've been stably and consistently employed as a self-employed person. If you've been in a series of internships and interim contracts and CDDs, which are short-term work contracts, it can be a lot more difficult to be naturalized French. And so one of the things that you want to really make sure is that your employment situation is stable. If you go on unemployment for any reason, especially during the process of becoming naturalized, you're going to be rejected or adjourned for a period of 2 years, and then you'll have to wait 2 years before you can apply again. So, as I mentioned, my book, Foolproof French Visas, covers the path to residency and naturalization for each visa type. And one of the things that I really like to work with on my clients before they even start the visa process is their long-term goals for living in France and whether or not they'd ultimately like to apply for French naturalization. So I hope that was helpful for you to clarify Harriet's experience becoming a French citizen. And again, we will be exploring the concept of French citizenship and what it means to request naturalization as a French citizen in future episodes. So thanks for watching and listening, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Bye. Hey, this is Allison Grant Lunes. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you learned something about living in France and were inspired about pursuing your own Franceformation. Do you want to learn how you can get the right visa and create your dream life in France? Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and to the Profiles in Franceformation podcast for more inspiring stories about people who made their Franceformation a reality, and for more tips and tricks on how to make your Franceformation happen for you. If you want to learn more about what visa is right for you and how to pursue your Franceformation, you can check out my book, Foolproof French Visas, which goes over basically every single way that you can possibly move to France. It's available as an ebook or in paperback on Amazon, and it will help you identify the right visa for you and prepare a successful application. Or if you'd like my personal help with applying for your visa and moving to France, you can go to www.yourfranceformation.com/free-call to request a free 30-minute Franceformation clarity call with me about how I can help you to make your dream a reality and get started on helping you to move to France. Thanks again for watching, and à bientôt.